I'm talking with Congressman Dennis Ross and Sridharan, the Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer for the Florida Center for Cybersecurity. Sri, why don't we start with a little bit of a generic question, which is, what are some of the recent cyber attacks that have made the news and are on the concern list for the center?
There have been lots of cyber attacks, and many of them result in breaches as well. And the real well-known ones are the Sony attack, and more recently this year, Anthem was breached as well. And there are many smaller ones as well that we see and hear about. There were about 80,000 attacks last year that resulted in 2,000 breaches. A breach would be where they steal the information that they are looking for, as opposed to just being an attack that they launch against an infrastructure. So there's been a lot of big name attacks and a lot of small names as well.
And in general, what's being targeted? Is it just financial information? Is it corporate data? Is it espionage?
But there are two basic things that we see. One is personal information that they would like to steal, like credit card information and financial information. And of course, they would like to steal the personal identity of citizens as well, social security numbers, etc. But the second one is the intellectual property theft. And the state actors launch a lot of attacks to steal the intellectual property from companies so that they can go straight to manufacturing as opposed to investing in R&D and become very competitive in the market very quickly. So those are the two main areas of attacks that we see. Either of them, they like to monetize it in some fashion or form.
And this question kind of fits for you, Sri, and then to you, Congressman. One of the recent attacks that I read about even was a breach. They believe that possibly the Russians were behind it, a breach of the White House's email system. Sri, how does something like that happen? And then, Congressman, how big a concern is it when it's reaching into the office of, the president, perhaps?
Well, I think it is something. I don't think any of us should believe that we can create an infrastructure that is completely breach-proof or hack-proof. Such a thing doesn't exist. It's a myth. So attacks are going to come through, hackings will take place, breaches will happen. It's not a question of if it'll happen, it's really a question of when. And the unfortunate thing is many of us don't know that we've been hacked or our company's intellectual property has been already breached and hacked. We just don't know that. That's the problem. So it doesn't matter whether it's White House or whoever else. The only thing with the White House is that the national security was not compromised in any fashion or form. I think they have enough protection and different layers of protection and processes that they follow that will prevent somebody from getting all the way through to stealing some national information. They breached some of the email systems on the periphery of the of the White House. I'm sorry. Sorry. Congressman?
It is a little disconcerting and gets close to home when they start breaching successfully into the White House. And as Sri pointed out, they're constantly being hacked. I mean, there's thousands upon thousands of attacks going on, and it's no matter how successful the breaches are. And you figure there's over 80% of the cyber infrastructure is in the private sector. And that's where we're mainly concerned as well, not only for national security purposes with government cybersecurity, but also in the private sector, because you'll see some of these private companies, such as Anthem, that was breached, one of the largest health insurers out there. They have to respond somehow, and they're very concerned about making a response that's going to jeopardize them to liability if they disclose any information that would be considered private or otherwise protected. So we're at the point now where I think that it's hit close to home with the White House breach. We see it happening in the private sector more commonly than we would like to expect, and now there has to be some kind of cooperation with the private sector and the government to be able to respond to these as quickly as we can to minimize the exposure that we're getting from some of these breaches.
Congressman, the two bills that just passed the House of Representatives and are headed to the Senate, H.R. 1560, the Protecting Cyber Networks Act, and H.R. 1731, the National Cybersecurity Protection Advancement Act, how do those, I don't want to say mandate, but how do those foster cooperation between
Actually, first of all, it's voluntary. The cooperation is all voluntary from the private sector, but it gives the private sector, if they feel that they've been breached, it gives them the opportunity to scrub the personal information and then share this with either other private companies or with the federal government, the NSA, in order to find out to what extent the breach has been made. And what needs to be done to counter it. We saw some things happen last year with Target. Target waited a long time after they were breached because they were concerned about the liability of disclosing anything, and they felt that compelled to try to fix it in-house. We need to have more interdependent cooperation between the federal government and other private companies to make sure that we can minimize the exposure that's going on. So both of these bills allowed that voluntary opportunity for the private sector to work with the federal government to protect them from liability if they do disclose or deal with other private companies or the federal government. It doesn't give them such great latitude that if they do something willful that they'll be protected. That won't happen. But it's a step in the right direction. And I think what's going to happen is we're going to see these two bills. Now, one came out of Homeland Security Committee. The other one came out of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. It'll go to the Senate. The Senate will do a bill, and then we'll have a conference. And I believe we're going to have a very good bill that'll go to the president's desk and hopefully become law.
When you say that it's voluntary, though, and you do have those concessions that hopefully will get companies to get involved, why should they? Why should they sign on to this?
Well, it's the integrity of their whole system is at risk here. In other words, if they can't protect their customer base, if they can't protect the privacy of their clients, then what good are they, regardless of what product or service that they provide? And they're going to be hacked. It's just a given. So being able to foster the incentives, if you will, to want to work with the NSA, to work with Homeland Security, to be able to find out the protocols that were being used to breach, and be able to protect you from liability if you're now working with the federal government. It doesn't mandate or allow for surveillance. There are some great consumer protections in there. But again, it allows for a quicker response time. It allows for greater resources and hopefully a very strong mitigation or lessening of what we consider to be some of the bigger breaches that have happened.
And in fact, if I may just add to what the Congressman said, he's absolutely spot on. But there are two other points too that I would like to make, and that is there's an organization that's been formed now called the ISACs, Information Sharing Organizations, within the financial services sector, for example. There's also one in healthcare and other verticals. But these organizations want to share information because one of the things that we found in the latest statistic that was published by Verizon, they issued a report on cyber breaches every year. 75% of the time, victim 0 to victim 1 is less than 24 hours. So if bank A has been attacked, they would rather share that information with all the other banks because they know that bank B is going to get hit within 24 hours in a similar fashion or style or the same type of malware that was used with victim 0 or bank 1. So it is very important that sharing this information will also put the other financial institutions on alert, for example, to make sure that it doesn't happen to them. They can take some extraordinary steps in a very short time frame. So I think that's a very important thing. And that goes to the meat of what the Congressman said. Collaboration through NSA, through DHS, through other DODs and other agencies, that you share this information, and the Financial Services ISAC has put together their own portal where they're going to share this information on a periodic basis. And that's a very good thing.
When you're talking about that cooperation in the financial services field, even through bills like these, how does that affect what the Center for Cybersecurity, the Florida Center for Cybersecurity, does? How does it affect what it teaches, particularly in, as you say, a field that is changing on a daily, if not hourly basis?
So I think there are a couple of points to make there. That's a very good question. One of the things that is of concern to us is some of these laws that are passed, it takes too long to get these things passed through legislation, through the legislative process. Cybersecurity is moving at a lightning speed. The way they hack today and the technology they use today is not the same as it is tomorrow. And so we need to come up with a mechanism to pass these legislations much faster than what is happening in the marketplace. But from a Florida Center for Cybersecurity standpoint, we are a repository of information. And as such, we will encourage the different financial institutions to make sure that they pay attention to the information posted on the portal and push it out, if you will, so that everybody is aware of the type of attacks that could be coming their way the next day.
And Congressman, with this field, as we say, just changing on a minute-by-minute basis, how important is it to have a Florida Center for Cybersecurity that is keeping its finger on the pulse of, the cyber world?
It's critical. It's critical for several reasons. Foremost is that the Congress always reacts. We're never that proactive. We never seem to want to take measures to prevent something from happening. Cybersecurity is one of those where we don't have that luxury. And because we have the resource for the Center, with the Center for Cybersecurity, we now can proactively plan, which is what we've done through this legislation. So for us to have that center here, so close to MacDill, so close to some of the financial centers that are here in the Tampa Bay region is incredibly important. But more importantly for my colleagues across the country, this is another resource for us so that we can do good legislation, as we've just done last week, in advance of what we anticipate may be some very serious cyber attacks. So it's critical. It's very important, obviously, economically for the region, but for the whole country. It's wonderful to know that we have the center here to be there to give us the resources and the leadership that we need.
And if I may just add to that, there's a lot of threat intelligence that's available. For example, if you want to look at the academic world, the kinds of attacks that we could expect, there is threat intelligence that comes from 4 or 5 different sources. But this is volumes of data. And we would like to be able to take that data on a daily basis and consolidate it in a much readable form in a one-page document, an executive summary that somebody can look at and say, all right, let's be prepared for this, and then somebody can do a deep dive into some of the kinds of attacks that can be expected. So we want to be able to provide consolidated threat intelligence through our portal, if you will, that we're in the process of setting up. So those are the kinds of tools that we would provide the marketplace, no matter whether it's healthcare or financial services or the utilities industry.
And Congressman, you kind of mentioned it earlier. How optimistic are you that this is going to come through the Senate and the President is going to sign it?
I'm very optimistic. I know for a fact that the President has indicated he's willing to sign it into law. It's a matter of getting the Senate to conference with us and get a final product as soon as possible, and the sooner the better. As Sri pointed out, I mean, things move so fast, exponentially now in the cyber world, that we don't have the luxury of time at all, and we have to be prepared. So I think that it will become law. I hope that we were able to keep a lot of the meat in the bill that we passed out of the House into the Senate conferees report, and that this President will sign it into law. I'm pretty confident.
Okay.
And the other interesting thing also is that from a technology standpoint, we're not sitting idle. There's a lot of investments that are being made.
Yes.
I was in Silicon Valley last week, and I met with one of the largest VCs in the area. They have invested hundreds of millions of dollars. Actually, the total investment is over $2 billion in 120 companies that's been invested in cybersecurity. They showcased 6 of those companies to me and a couple of people that I had taken with me. Admiral McConnell was with me at for that visit. I was just blown away with the kind of things that they're looking at in a proactive manner. That's what I was trying to key on. In a very proactive manner to kind of get ahead of the game and to prevent cyber attacks from even taking place. Mind-boggling technologies. And then this morning I got up early in the morning to look at some cyber news, and somebody is coming up with a mattress pad that would be networking with the Internet of Things to do all kinds of things for us in our lives. And we got to make sure that they're cyber hack proof.
Congressman Dennis Ross, Sridharan, Managing Director and Chief Operating Officer for the Florida Center for Cybersecurity. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.